If you can translate this, I'll triple your salary. That's what the CEO laughed, waving a document no one could understand. Everyone in the office chuckled, except the woman with the mop. She didn't laugh. She didn't speak. She just looked at him and said, "I can." In that moment, the office froze. And by the time she finished reading, the room would never be the same again, because what they thought was a joke became the moment that exposed their arrogance, shattered their assumptions, and changed a cleaner's life forever. My name is Clara. For 2 years, I cleaned the floors of Wexley International. I scrubbed toilets, emptied bins, and vacuumed conference rooms where people talked about things I could translate in my sleep. If only they had asked. But they never asked. To them, I was just the cleaner, the invisible woman. The quiet footsteps they stepped over on their way to power meetings and catered lunches. They laughed around me, whispered secrets around me, and once I even heard them bet money on whether I understood a single word they were saying. I didn't say anything, not because I couldn't, but because I had learned that sometimes silence is the most powerful response. Until one day, the CEO held up a foreign legal document, in Hungarian, and said loud enough for the entire office to hear, "Translate this, and I'll triple your salary." Everyone laughed, everyone except me, because what they didn't know was, I used to teach linguistics at a university in Europe. I spoke 5 languages fluently, and I had been a translator for international courts before life knocked me down, and I ended up holding a mop instead of a microphone. But on that day, I picked up more than a piece of paper. I picked up my dignity, my voice, and a new chapter that no one, not even me, saw coming. This is the story of how I went from janitor to the one who saved the company, from overlooked to irreplaceable, and how one arrogant bet turned into a lesson that silenced an entire office and changed everything. I used to believe that silence was the safest place to exist, that if I kept my head down, pushed my cleaning cart quietly, and never made eye contact, I could survive the long, suffocating days inside that office building. But survival isn't the same as living. My name is Clara. I'm 46 years old, and for the past 2 years, I've cleaned the hallways, restrooms, and glass conference tables of Wexley International, one of the biggest logistics companies in the city. They say it's where deals are made and empires are built. But for me, it was just a place where people stepped over me, literally and metaphorically. I always arrived before sunrise. While the sky was still yawning, I'd be there, wiping down coffee stains, scraping gum off the elevator floor, and replacing bathroom soap no one would thank me for. I wasn't just invisible. I was deliberately unseen. Until the day he noticed me, but not for the reasons I ever wanted. It was a Wednesday. That awkward stretch in the middle of the week when everyone's tired, irritable, and waiting for Friday to rescue them. I was in the executive hallway polishing the glass near the entrance to the CEO's office when I heard his voice echo. "Move that cart. Do I look like I have time to play hopscotch with the janitorial team?" The cart trembled as it was shoved violently to the side. I barely caught my balance. I turned, heart racing, and saw Mr. Callahan, our CEO. Crisp Italian suit, shiny leather shoes, hair that looked like it had its own PR team, and an ego that walked 3 steps ahead of him. He was surrounded by assistants, interns, and one nervous-looking woman clutching a clipboard, his executive secretary, Lena. I'm sorry, sir," I mumbled, stepping back quickly. He didn't even look at me. "I've told you all," he said, waving a hand as if dismissing the very air I breathed. "I don't care what they're cleaning. If they're in my way, they're not doing their job." There was a beat of silence. I could hear my own heart pounding louder than the fluorescent lights above. Then came the laugh, the one he always used when he wanted everyone to know just how untouchable he was. God, this place would run so much smoother if people just stayed in their lanes. People chuckled, not because it was funny, but because when the king laughs, the court follows. I pushed my cart to the side of the hallway, cheeks burning. It wasn't the first time he'd spoken like that. Wouldn't be the last. I'd heard the way he talked about the cafeteria staff, the receptionists, even Lena when she wasn't around. But I listened. That was my unspoken superpower. I noticed things most people missed. The anxious glance Lena gave him whenever he raised his voice. The way the intern by the water cooler gripped his lanyard like a lifeline. And the fact that every time Mr. Callahan shouted, the entire floor flinched, like a building that had learned to brace for earthquakes. I didn't belong in their world. Or at least, that's what I told myself. It was easier than remembering who I used to be, who I really was before I became the ghost pushing a mop bucket down corporate hallways. But that day, something shifted. Later that morning, I was restocking the paper towels in the women's restroom when I heard the sound of rapid footsteps and a voice barking orders. Mr. Callahan again. "Lena, where's that translator? We've got some alien gibberish from Europe and I need it deciphered before 5 p.m. I froze. Alien gibberish? A translator? Some weird-ass language, he continued, clearly within earshot. Looks like Hungarian or some other nonsense. What kind of psychopath sends contracts in a code no one here can read? Hungarian. My stomach twisted. I hadn't heard that word spoken aloud in years. He kept ranting. And don't even think about Google Translate. This is official. There's money involved. I need someone who speaks human, not some caveman encryption. There was nervous shuffling, papers rustling. I swear, if one more person tells me we'll look into it, I'll fire the entire legal department. I peeked out the bathroom door, just enough to catch a glimpse of the chaos. A stack of documents, thick, stamped, sealed, was being tossed around like junk mail. No one knew what to do. Half the office was gathered near the executive boardroom, whispering, fumbling with apps, making wild guesses. Some even laughed. And then I heard it. That sentence that would change everything. "Triple salary to whoever can make sense of this garbage," he said it with a smirk, loud enough for everyone to hear. Everyone froze, then laughter, as if it was the punchline to the best joke in town. 3 times my salary? I'll start learning Hungarian now, someone joked. I'll ask ChatGPT to figure it out. Another one laughed. It was a circus. And I was the cleaner sweeping up after the clowns. But deep inside, something in me stirred. Not anger, not pride, something deeper. Recognition. Because while they laughed at the language they couldn't pronounce, I saw something they couldn't. Value. And not just in the paper, in myself. I had been silent for too long, invisible for too long. But maybe it was time to step forward. Not for the money, not for him, but for the version of me that had been buried beneath a blue uniform and latex gloves. And so, I stepped out of the shadows. As I stepped out of the restroom and into the hallway, my heart was pounding so hard I thought someone might hear it echo through the vents. There they were, a semicircle of employees clustered around the glass conference room. Laptops open, phones in hand, eyes darting across screens filled with strange characters and online translators. The buzz of uncertainty hovered in the air. And in the center of it all, Mr. Callahan, arms crossed, jaw clenched, brow furrowed like a man whose $1,000,000 empire was under threat from an alphabet he couldn't decode. He was pacing like a tiger in a cage. "Nothing," he barked. "Still nothing?" Lena, flustered and pale, clutched a folder close to her chest. "We've contacted 3 agencies, sir. The closest available Hungarian translator is in another state. The others said it would take 2 business days. 2 business days?" He exploded. "This isn't a birthday card. These are legal documents. There's a deadline." He slammed his palm on the table so hard that a stapler jumped. the room went silent for a moment, before the murmurs resumed. I stepped closer, blending in with the crowd, pretending to check a trash can nearby. I didn't want to draw attention. Not yet. I needed to understand exactly what this was. Mr. Callahan picked up the stack of papers again, flipping through the pages with a dramatic scoff. Looks like someone spilled alphabet soup on this. I mean, who uses this language? Then, with theatrical flair, he raised the papers in the air like a stage performer. Tell you what, triple salary, triple, if anyone here can translate this gibberish before 5 p.m. He grinned as if he'd just pulled off the joke of the year. A CEO dangling a carrot he believed no one could reach. And for a second, the room responded exactly how he wanted. Triple? I'll just ask my dog to do it. Maybe aliens can help if we get lucky. Too bad Duolingo doesn't have Hungarian on speedrun. Laughter erupted, nervous, loud, complicit. I stood at the edge of that circle, unnoticed as usual, but not unfeeling. That moment was more than a joke. It was a performance of power, of mockery, and humiliation, directed at everyone he thought was beneath him. And yet, he had no idea that somewhere in that same room stood the only person who actually could help him. Me. But I hesitated. Because once you step forward, there's no going back. You can't unreveal yourself. You can't undo the shift that happens when people finally see you. And I wasn't sure I was ready to be seen. Not like that. Still, something pushed me forward. Maybe it was the 2 years of being overlooked. Maybe it was my daughter's blood sugar monitor flashing red the night before, reminding me how fragile our finances were. Or maybe it was simply the human need to reclaim some dignity. I took a deep breath and stepped into the circle. "Excuse me," I said softly. No one heard me. "Excuse me," I repeated, louder this time. Lena turned first, blinking as if unsure I was even addressing them. Then Mr. Callahan turned, and I swear, the entire temperature of the room dropped. "What is it?" he asked, impatient. "If it's the floor needing mopping, talk to facilities." I swallowed my fear. "It's not about the floor," I said. "It's about the documents." The laughter returned, quiet at first, like a ripple before a wave. "Oh no," someone muttered under their breath. "She's not serious." Is she actually saying, "I can help," I said clearly. "I understand the language." Silence. The kind that feels like it's sucking all the air out of the room. Mr. Callahan stared at me. Then, laughter. His own, booming, arrogant laugh bouncing off the glass walls. "You?" he said between gasps. "You think you can read this? That's rich. What's next? The vending machine fixing our accounting?" A few people chuckled. Others looked uncomfortable. I didn't move. "I'm not joking," I said. He raised an eyebrow. "So let me get this straight. You, the cleaner, want me to believe that you speak—" He waved the papers. "Whatever this is?" "Yes," I replied. "It's Hungarian, and I can read it." More laughter. Then mock applause from someone in the back. "Oh, good," Mr. Callahan said, rolling his eyes. "Well, folks, I guess we can cancel the agencies. Superwoman's here." I didn't flinch. "I'm serious," I said. "Give me 5 minutes with the document." He narrowed his eyes. The sarcasm drained slightly. For a second, I could see the flicker of calculation behind them. Was it possible? Could it be true? He scoffed again, but there was hesitation now. "All right," he said, tossing the papers onto the conference table. "Knock yourself out." I stepped forward, every eye in the room on me. For the first time, I wasn't pushing a cart. I was pushing boundaries, and it terrified me. I picked up the top page, scanned the lines, and slowly, deliberately, I began to speak. Tistelt Danilo Callahan or, We write to inform you of your legal status as the sole beneficiary. And the room froze. Gone was the laughter. Gone were the smirks. Because what they were hearing wasn't a guess. It was fluency. Natural. Confident. Precise. The kind of fluency that doesn't come from Duolingo or Google Translate. The kind that comes from life. I looked up. Mr. Callahan's face had gone pale. Is that real? He asked, his voice suddenly quieter. Yes, I said. Very real. And there's more. But you might want to sit down. You could have heard a pin drop. No one was laughing anymore. Mr. Callahan, this man who barked orders like gunshots and devoured attention like oxygen, stood completely still. His mouth slightly open, brows furrowed as if his brain was buffering. And I just kept reading. The inheritance amounting to 15 million, which includes bank assets and multiple real estate properties in Hungary. A few gasps. Then, complete silence again. No phones clicking. No coffee being sipped. Just 20 or so professionals staring at the cleaner who, for the last 2 years, they'd barely looked in the eye. I looked up. Mr. Callahan blinked. You're not joking? I shook my head. No, sir, I'm not. He ran a hand over his jaw, then laughed. But this time, it wasn't arrogant. It was nervous. What the hell is going on? He muttered. I could see the wheels turning in his mind. That iron confidence he carried like a badge was starting to crack. Because if what I was saying was true, this wasn't just a translation. This was a miracle. But miracles rarely arrive in the form you expect. He stared at the documents on the table, as if trying to see if the ink would suddenly make sense now that he knew someone else could read it. I don't understand. Who even are you? It was the question I'd been avoiding for 2 years, and now I had to answer it. My name is Clara Farkas, I said, voice steady. Before working here, I was a professor of Eastern European languages at the University of São Paulo. No one moved. I specialized in Hungarian, Czech, Slovakian, and Romanian, I continued. Taught for over 15 years. You could almost hear necks creaking as heads turned toward one another. I wasn't the only one who had just flipped their world upside down. I also worked as a sworn translator for the Hungarian consulate. Legal documents, court hearings, successions like this one. This, I said, gesturing toward the papers, is what I used to do every day. Mr. Callahan sat down, actually sat down, as if the truth had knocked the wind right out of him. But, you're a janitor, someone said from the back. I turned to face the voice. It was one of the junior analysts, a girl no older than 25. She looked embarrassed the moment the words left her mouth. Yes, I replied. I am a janitor. That doesn't erase who I was, or what I know. He looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. Mr. Callahan, still processing, leaned forward, elbows on the table. Why? His voice was low, barely above a whisper. Why would someone like you end up here? I inhaled slowly. This was the part I never liked telling. Not because I was ashamed, but because it required remembering, and remembering hurts. I exposed a corruption scheme at the university, I said. Professors selling grades, giving diplomas to international students in exchange for bribes. When I reported it, I was the one who got punished, labeled as a troublemaker, fired. Gasps again. This time, not of surprise, but of guilt. I was blacklisted from academia, couldn't find work anywhere. My husband lost his job around the same time, and my daughter, Sophia, she was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. We needed health insurance. We needed income. And this cleaning job, I looked around, was the only stable thing we could find. Lena, standing at the far end of the table, covered her mouth with one hand. Mr. Callahan rubbed his temples. For once, he had nothing to say. I turned back to the documents, held them gently, like a surgeon about to operate. "These papers are very real," I said, "and very urgent. If you don't act before 6 p.m., you'll lose everything. The inheritance, the assets, all of it." "But why Hungarian?" he asked, still in disbelief. "My father was Hungarian," I replied. "I grew up speaking it. Later, I studied it deeply. Lived in Budapest for a few years. It's more than a language to me. It's part of who I am." He stared at me like he'd never seen me before, because he hadn't. Not really. No one had. They'd seen a uniform, a mop, a function, but not the woman, not the mind, not the story. "So," he finally said, "what would it take for you to help me?" The question floated in the air like a truce. I thought about it for a moment, then smiled faintly. "You already made the offer," I said. He blinked. "What?" "Triple your salary," I reminded him. "You said it yourself." The room erupted, not in laughter, but in stunned silence. And then, to my surprise, Lena chuckled, a quiet, breathy laugh of disbelief. Then someone else smiled. A few eyes widened in admiration. Even Callahan let out a short breath that might have been a laugh if it didn't feel so heavy with regret. "All right," he said. "You've got a deal." He extended his hand. I looked at it for a moment, then shook it. For the first time in years, not as the cleaner, but as a professional. An equal. After I shook his hand, a strange stillness settled in the room. It wasn't awkward. It wasn't even uncomfortable. It was respect. But not the kind you get from status or salary. The kind that comes when someone realizes they've been blind to something extraordinary, standing right in front of them. "I'll need a quiet room," I said calmly. "A computer, internet access, and no interruptions." "Lena," Mr. Callahan said, still visibly rattled. "Give her whatever she needs. Boardroom B is free, right?" "Yes, sir." "And, get her a coffee or something." I nodded politely, though I hadn't asked for coffee. As I walked toward the boardroom, the sea of employees parted like I was royalty entering court. Their faces were filled with a mixture of guilt, admiration, and something new. Curiosity. No one had ever asked who I was. Now they couldn't stop wondering. Once inside, I closed the door and took a deep breath. My hands trembled slightly as I opened the laptop. It wasn't the pressure that made me nervous. It was the weight of being seen again. For so long, I had existed in the margins, where expectations were low, voices were quiet, and dignity was optional. I had become comfortable in the shadows, where no one could laugh at what they didn't know. But today, there were no shadows left to hide in. As I began translating, my mind moved in fluent waves of syntax and cultural nuance. I wasn't just converting words, I was decoding a foreign legal system, preserving tone, formatting formalities, and ensuring that not a single phrase could be misinterpreted. I wasn't doing this for him. I was doing it for myself. For the woman who once stood in front of a lecture hall filled with students and spoke 5 languages with confidence. For the mother who read medical journals in 3 languages to find the best care for her diabetic daughter. And for the human being who had been told, again and again, that her worth depended on a job title and the clothes she wore. I didn't stop working until I had finished translating every document. 3 hours. No breaks. No distractions. At 4:45 p.m., I printed everything, organized the pages into 2 folders, one for the CEO, one for the legal courier, and walked back into the open office. The same people who used to glance through me now turned their chairs to face me. I could feel their eyes following each step. Mr. Callahan stood up when he saw me coming. I placed the folder on his desk. "It's done," I said simply. "Fully translated, annotated, and the reply letter is ready for signing." He opened the folder and skimmed through it. His eyes moved faster and faster. "God, this is thorough?" I offered. He nodded. It's better than what we get from legal." "I've done hundreds of these," I replied. "Some for diplomats, some for estate courts. The formatting has to be precise, the terms airtight." He looked up at me, not as a boss, but as someone who was just beginning to understand what he'd nearly thrown away. This is worth way more than triple my salary." I didn't reply. Some truths don't need affirmation. They just need to settle. Lena leaned in to look at the documents. Her eyes widened. "Clara," she said softly, "why didn't you ever tell anyone?" I shrugged. "Because no one ever asked." That silence, the silence of assumptions, is louder than any insult. But the question lingered in the air. Why hadn't I told anyone? Maybe because it's hard to explain why a former university professor is scrubbing toilets in a company where no one even remembers her name. Maybe because when people see a cleaner, they don't imagine scholar or consular translator. They imagine someone who ran out of options. And that was true. To a point. But what they didn't realize was that dignity is a choice, not a job description. Mr. Callahan cleared his throat. Would you be willing to stay?" he asked. "As part of the team, officially." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean not as the janitor?" He chuckled awkwardly. "Yes. I mean, I'd like to offer you a position. Maybe head of international correspondence? You'd be translating contracts, managing language services, handling—" "Slow down," I said, but with a smile. "Let's not sprint before we walk." He smiled back, almost sheepishly. "I just don't want to lose you." I looked around. People were still watching, but not with judgment, with something closer to reverence. That's when Amanda from accounting stepped forward. "Clara," she said, a little embarrassed. "I'm sorry for laughing earlier." I nodded. "Thank you." Then Roberto from logistics came over. "I had no idea. I just assumed—" "I know," I said, saving him from finishing the sentence. One by one, the team came up, offering apologies, offering coffee, offering chairs. It was like watching an entire culture begin to shift, one realization at a time. And in that moment, I understood something even more powerful than language. People don't always know how to see beyond appearances. But when you finally force them to see, some of them will never look at you the same again. And that's where real change begins. Dikiwen. At 5 p.m. sharp, just as the golden light of late afternoon began spilling through the tall glass windows, Lena's phone rang. She frowned as she answered, her tone clipped and professional. "Wexley International," Lena speaking. "Yes, he's right here." She turned to Mr. Callahan, hand over the receiver. "It's the Hungarian consulate." A chill ran down my spine. Mr. Callahan looked startled. "For me?" They said it's urgent. He took the phone, eyes darting nervously. Yes, this is Danilo Callahan. I watched his face shift from confusion to panic in under a minute. "What do you mean? Additional documentation? What legal issue?" But the translator just finished. "Yes, she's here. She's right next to me." He turned to me, mouthing, "They want to talk to you." I took the phone, heart pounding. "Hello, this is Clara Farkas." The voice on the other end was warm, accented, and familiar. "Clara, thank God it's you. We didn't realize you were involved in this case. There's been a development." "What kind of development?" There are 3 new claims filed just this morning in Budapest. Distant relatives and one woman claiming she was the deceased's partner. If these aren't addressed immediately, the inheritance could be frozen. My breath caught in my throat. How long do we have? Until midnight tonight. Hungarian time. I did the math instantly. That gave us about 7 hours. Do you have the full documents? I asked. They're being sent now, DHL. Should arrive within the hour. I'll stay on standby. I handed the phone back to Mr. Callahan, who was already sweating. What's happening? He asked. There are new contestations on the inheritance, I said. Relatives appearing out of nowhere. A woman claiming she was in a long-term relationship with your uncle. They're trying to challenge your right to inherit. What does that mean? He asked, voice rising. It means, I said carefully, if we don't respond with the correct evidence tonight, you could lose everything. The room tensed again. All the admiration, all the amazement. It quickly twisted into anxiety. How? He asked, visibly shaken. I mean, what do I even do? I don't know anything about Hungarian law. I don't speak the language. I don't even know if this uncle had a partner. I put a hand on the back of a chair and leaned forward. Then you'll need help. Again. He looked at me, eyes wide. You? I nodded. But I'll need full access to every document you have. Bank records, family papers, letters, emails, anything that might prove your legal relationship and the authenticity of the will. He nodded quickly. Yes, of course. And one more thing. I looked him in the eye. I need to be in charge. No interruptions. No second guessing. If you want to keep that inheritance, you let me run this. He held my gaze for a moment. Then he nodded. You've got it. Within 20 minutes, a courier arrived with a thick yellow envelope. Legal markings, international stamps. My hands trembled slightly as I signed for it. I ripped the seal open, revealing over 20 pages of dense, handwritten legal Hungarian text. I closed the boardroom door again. This time, the tension was real. Not from embarrassment, but from the weight of urgency. I sat down and began reading. The first document was a formal challenge from a woman named Esther Nagy, claiming she had lived with Joseph Callahan, the uncle, for over 10 years. She claimed to be his common-law wife and argued that she had taken care of him in his final months. 2 more documents came from men claiming to be distant cousins, insisting Joseph had promised them parts of the estate in conversations notarized verbally, whatever that meant. My stomach turned. These weren't just emotional pleas. They had lawyers, official paperwork, motives. I opened my laptop and began cross-referencing everything, comparing dates, signatures, formatting inconsistencies, looking for legal holes I could exploit. At one point, Lena slipped in with a tray of coffee and sandwiches. Clara? She said gently. I looked up, my eyes slightly strained from the fine print. I thought you might need fuel. I smiled. Thank you. She didn't leave immediately. Instead, she sat down across from me. I can't stop thinking about it, she whispered. About what? That we've worked together for 2 years, and I never once asked your name. I paused, then met her gaze. It's all right. No, it's not. You're brilliant, and we didn't even see you. I smiled, not out of forgiveness, but understanding. Most people don't look down, I said simply, especially when they think they're above you. She nodded, and left quietly. By 7:30 p.m., I had read everything, found several contradictions in the relatives' stories, tracked legal inconsistencies in the woman's timeline, noted that she only appeared in his life 6 months before he died. Too convenient, but we needed more. We needed proof. That's when I remembered something Joseph had written in the will. To my only nephew, Danilo, whose father, Miguel, I lost touch with decades ago. It was a breadcrumb. I picked up my phone. "Mariana?" I said. "I need a birth certificate of Danilo's father, and marriage certificates of Joseph's parents if you can get them." She didn't ask why. "I'm on it." By 8:30 p.m., Mariana had sent scanned certified copies from Sao Paulo. I printed them, attached notary statements, and included brief translations. Finally, I wrote a detailed rebuttal, in Hungarian, typed, formatted, referenced. The kind of response a high-powered international law firm would charge a fortune to draft. At 9:45 p.m., I walked back into Mr. Callahan's office. He stood as I entered. "I've got everything," I said. "But I need one final sign-off." He sat down and read through the response with wide eyes. This is incredible. It's just the truth, legally polished." He signed it, then turned to me. "How can I even thank you?" "You'll have your chance," I replied. "But right now we need to send this to Budapest, immediately." He nodded, and for the first time since I'd known him. He didn't argue. He followed. Barkiamardam. By 10:15 p.m., the documents were scanned, encrypted, and emailed to the legal team in Budapest. A hard copy had also been handed to a courier who promised to get it on the next diplomatic flight out of Sao Paulo. Everything that could be done had been done. Or so I thought. Mr. Callahan was sitting at his desk, his tie loosened, the bravado long gone from his shoulders. His voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. "Clara," he said, eyes bloodshot. "They're requesting an in-person review." I frowned. "What kind of review?" "A hearing," he replied. "In Budapest, with a judge. The inheritance can't be finalized without testimony. They want someone there within 72 hours. I felt the weight of that sentence land like bricks in my chest. "That means you have to go." He blinked. "Me? I don't even know where my passport is." I took a long breath, already knowing where this was heading. "Then you're going," I said, "and I'm going with you." His head snapped up. "You'd do that?" "I didn't come this far just to let you crash and burn in Hungarian court." He ran a hand through his hair. "But I don't speak the language. I won't know what they're saying. What if they ask me questions I can't answer? What if—" "You won't be alone," I said firmly. "You'll have me." There was a long pause. "Clara," he started, hesitant. "If I'm being honest, I don't deserve your help." I tilted my head. "You're right. You don't." His eyes widened. "But your uncle's wishes do," I added. "And your daughter probably does. And the legacy of a man who tried to reconnect with his family before dying. That deserves to be honored." He nodded slowly. "Then we'd better start packing." By 6 a.m. the next day, we were at the passport office, fast-tracking documentation. Mariana had called in a favor with someone in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. By noon, flights were booked, bags packed, legal appointments scheduled. It was all happening fast, but not recklessly. Every move was strategic, calculated. And in the midst of that whirlwind, I saw something unexpected growing in Mr. Callahan. Humility. He started asking questions, not to challenge me, but to learn. He started listening, really listening, when I explained Hungarian legal nuances, estate law differences, and courtroom expectations. And most of all, he started to trust me. That night, as we sat in our respective seats on the flight to Europe, he turned to me and said, "You know, I used to think competence came with a title." I raised an eyebrow. "And now?" "Now I know it comes in janitor uniforms, too." I smiled. Better late than never. Landing in Budapest was surreal. The air felt heavier. The architecture was like something out of a storybook. Majestic, quiet, cold. The taxi ride to the hotel was silent, save for the tapping of my fingers on the tablet as I reviewed legal notes again. At the hotel, I was greeted by Andras Kovac, a former colleague from the consulate, and one of the most respected legal consultants in Central Europe. He embraced me warmly. "Clara, it's been too long." "I wish it were under different circumstances," I replied. Andras turned to Mr. Callahan and extended his hand. "You must be the lucky heir." "More lucky than I deserve," he said quietly. Andras looked between us. "We have a lot of ground to cover." The next 24 hours were brutal. Meetings at the law office, translations of supplementary forms, back and forth calls with the judge's clerk. And finally, a mock trial, where I drilled Mr. Callahan with questions to prepare him for anything the contesting parties might say. "I'm terrible at this," he groaned after one session. "You're not on trial," I said. "Just be honest, respectful, clear. What if I mess it up?" "You won't. You have me." The day of the hearing arrived like a storm. The courtroom was imposing. Vaulted ceilings, carved wood, ancient portraits glaring from the walls. 3 challengers sat across the room. A stern woman claiming to be Joseph's common-law wife, and 2 smug-looking men claiming distant kinship. Their lawyers were already whispering, pointing. Mr. Callahan looked like he might pass out. I leaned in. "Remember," I said, "don't interrupt. Don't get defensive. Let the evidence speak." He nodded. The judge entered. Everyone rose. And just like that, it began. They started by questioning Mr. Callahan's identity. Their lawyer insinuated the will could be forged. I handed the judge notarized documents and certified translations, birth certificates, marriage licenses, the DNA report Andras had arranged last minute. They tried again, this time attacking the timeline, accusing Danilo of never visiting his uncle. I presented Joseph's letter, half-written, full of emotion, found next to his will. It mentioned Danilo by name. Then came Esther, the supposed partner. She cried, told stories. But we presented testimony from neighbors who confirmed she had only appeared 6 months before Joseph's death, after he fell ill. The judge took notes, silent, expressionless. Finally, the judge turned to Mr. Callahan. "Do you have anything to say, Mr. Callahan?" Danilo stood, nervous, sweaty. Then he looked at me, and somehow, something shifted. He cleared his throat. "I didn't know Joseph," he said honestly, "but I know what it means to be given a second chance. And I know that family matters, even when we arrive late." His voice cracked. "I've made mistakes, big ones. But I'm here because someone believed in me, when I didn't even believe in myself." The room was quiet. Even the challengers had stopped whispering. The judge nodded once. "We will return with a decision shortly." Danilo sat down, shoulders slumped. "How'd I do?" he whispered. I smiled. "You spoke like a human. That's more than most do in there." He laughed. A real, soft, human laugh. He held a thin stack of papers in his hand and adjusted his glasses with the weight of centuries behind them. It was a gesture so precise, so final, that even the air seemed to pause in reverence. Danilo sat beside me, frozen. I could feel the tension vibrating through his body like static electricity. The judge cleared his throat. "After reviewing the evidence," he said in Hungarian, "and considering all submitted documentation and testimony, this court finds that—" I whispered the translation into Danilo's ear. He gripped the edge of his seat. "Mr. Danilo Callahan is the legal and sole beneficiary of Joseph Callahan's estate." Gasps. Cries. An exhale of relief so deep that Danilo nearly collapsed backward into the bench. The challengers, Esther and the 2 supposed cousins, murmured complaints, but it was over. The gavel came down. Decision final. Danilo turned to me, eyes wide. "I won?" I smiled. We won. He covered his face for a moment, overcome, then pulled me into a spontaneous hug. For a man who once called me the janitor, without even looking me in the eye, it was the closest thing to repentance I'd ever seen. The next 48 hours moved fast. Legal papers were signed, documents were sealed and filed. Joseph's assets, 15 million euros, 2 properties in Budapest, and a substantial investment portfolio, were officially transferred to Danilo's name. But the inheritance wasn't the most powerful thing that changed that week. It was the man himself. By the time we landed back in São Paulo, Danilo wasn't walking like a CEO. He was walking like someone who had been taught what leadership really means. The office buzzed when we arrived. Lena rushed up with a bouquet. Mariana brought coffee. Roberto and Amanda had organized balloons. "Welcome back, boss," in crooked permanent marker letters. And then, they saw me. But this time, no one looked through me. No one avoided eye contact. People smiled, shook my hand, asked if I'd be staying on. I hadn't made up my mind yet. Later that afternoon, Danilo called a company-wide meeting, something he'd never done before. Everyone gathered in the open-floor lounge, murmuring with anticipation. Danilo stood up front with a stack of papers in one hand and nothing rehearsed in the other. "Before anything," he began, "I owe you all a massive thank you, especially Clara." He looked at me and held the gaze. This company nearly lost an opportunity of a lifetime because of my arrogance. And if not for her brilliance, patience, and frankly, her grace, I'd still be in a courtroom in Budapest praying someone could Google translate a will. Laughter rippled through the room, warm, genuine, self-aware. He continued. "Clara reminded me that talent doesn't always wear a suit, and dignity isn't tied to a title. She reminded me that the people we overlook might be the ones who save us." There was a beat. Then he held up a new document. "As of today, I'm naming Clara as Director of International Legal and Language Affairs. Full salary, full benefits, and full autonomy." The applause erupted like thunder. It felt surreal. Almost too much. But for once, I didn't shrink. I stood tall. Over the next few weeks, life began to reshape. I traded my cleaning uniform for tailored jackets and heels. My old badge was replaced with a new one. Director Clara Farkas. I started training junior staff in international communications. Danilo asked me to oversee new overseas expansion strategies. And one afternoon, as I was preparing a portfolio for our first Hungarian client, he walked into my office with a strange smile on his face. "I just got off a call," he said. "With the Hungarian parliament." I blinked. "The parliament? They're offering us both honorary citizenship." I laughed. "You're joking." "No. They were so impressed with your professionalism and cultural fluency during the court process that they're offering you consulting work as well." For the first time in a long time, I felt something stir inside me that had been missing for years. Pride. Not the loud, arrogant kind, but the quiet kind. The kind that lives in knowing you didn't give up, even when the world stopped seeing you. But the best moment came a few weeks later. I arrived home one evening to find my daughter, Sophia, waiting for me on the couch. She had an envelope in her hand. "Mom," she said, eyes wide with tears, "I got in." My breath caught. "You got in?" "I got into med school, USP, full scholarship." I sat down slowly, covered my mouth, cried without shame, because for so long I had cleaned floors hoping to keep her alive, and now she was going to be saving lives. A year has passed since that day in the office, when the CEO laughed and said he'd triple someone's salary if they could translate that nonsense. Now? He tells that story at conferences, with humility, with a twist of irony, and always with my name attached. He even started a company-wide program, a fund that allocates 10% of annual profit to training and promoting internal talent. regardless of title, role, or resume. Because, as he says now, you never know when your janitor is the smartest person in the building. And me? I still carry my mop bucket with me. Not because I clean anymore, but because it reminds me where I came from. It reminds me that silence isn't weakness, that invisibility doesn't equal irrelevance, and that sometimes the most powerful voice in the room is the one no one expected to speak. Until she did. And sometimes the brightest minds in the room are the ones you never even noticed. Sometimes the hero of the story doesn't wear a suit. They carry a mop, wear silence like armor, and hide a history the world never bothered to ask about. And sometimes, all it takes is one moment, one opportunity, one arrogant challenge, to uncover a brilliance that no one saw coming. Clara wasn't just the cleaner. She was a woman with a silenced past, a degree gathering dust, a gift the world had tried to bury. But the world can only bury those who stop believing in themselves. And Clara? She never stopped. This is a story about second chances, about seeing people for who they truly are, not for the labels we slap on their backs. It's a story about dignity, about quiet strength, and how one simple act of disrespect became the spark that changed everything. So now I ask you, how many Claras have you ignored in your life? How many times have you looked past someone because of their job title, their clothes, their accent, without ever stopping to wonder what brilliance they carry inside? Maybe it's time to start looking closer. Maybe it's time to listen more. Maybe it's time to give someone a chance. If this story moved you, drop a comment below saying, "I saw Clara." Let that be our way of saying we're done overlooking the invisible. We're done ignoring greatness just because it's quiet. Like this video if you believe respect matters more than rank. Subscribe for more true, powerful stories that go beyond the surface. Stories that reach where most videos don't, into the heart. And remember, you never know who's cleaning your floor, but they might just be the one who could change your world.